Ever pondered why, when you call your friend in Australia at noon, they grumble about being woken up in the middle of the night? Well, it's not because they've turned into a nocturnal creature. It's all about time zones, my friends. Now imagine this. A pair of twins born on either side of the international dateline, one in Russia and one in Alaska. The one born in Russia, at 1:59 a.m. on a Sunday, would technically have an older sibling in Alaska, born at 2:01 a.m. but on Saturday. So, who's the older sibling now? Chuckles. Time zones can really mess with your head. But what's the story behind these time zones? Let's rewind to the era of railroads. Before the late 19th century, people used to set their clocks by the sun. Noon was when the sun was directly overhead. This meant that every city and town had its own separate time zone. Can you imagine the chaos? You'd have to change your watch every time you traveled a few miles. Then along came the railroads, and suddenly, people needed a more standardized way to keep time. Hence, enter Sanford Fleming, a Canadian engineer who proposed a system of 24 equally spaced time zones around the world. Fleming's system was first adopted by the Great Britain in the year 1884, and later by the rest of the world. But here's a fun fact. Not everyone agreed to this system. For example, Nepal decided to set its time zone 15 minutes ahead of Indian Standard Time because, well, they just felt like it. And then there's China. Despite its vast size, the whole country follows Beijing time. So when it's lunchtime in Beijing, it's also lunchtime in the far west of China, even though the sun has just risen. Talk about a breakfast for champions. Now let's get back to our twins. According to international dateline rules, the Russian twin would be older, despite being born later. But try explaining that at family reunions. Summing it up, time zones can be a real brain teaser. They were created to bring some order to the world, but they also brought along a whole new level of confusion. And if you ever feel down, just remember, somewhere in the world, it's already your birthday. So, technically, you can have your cake and eat it too. Or at least, that's what you can tell your diet. But remember, the next time you're calling your friend on the other side of the world, maybe check the time zone first. They'll appreciate not being woken up at an ungodly hour. Because no one, I repeat, no one likes a midnight wake-up call unless there's cake involved. So that's the whimsical world of time zones for you. A tale of confusion, chaos, and cake. Now don't you feel smarter already?